Hey everybody, look at this. It is the video version of Third and Lang. So in other words, a show that was already handsome and sexy has quadrupled that equation immediately by flipping on the video cameras.
Yeah.
You can hear my partner in the background. I'm about to bring him in a minute here, but again, we are here under an emergency watch. The IHSA. Somewhat surprisingly, we'll get into that with our guest, but I think somewhat surprisingly announced a couple days back that the IHSA board of directors have decided to pass seeding 1 through 32 from 6A through 1A. So the entire IHSA football playoff field for this coming fall will be a true seeded 1 through 32, and with nothing else really to add except his many thoughts. Hold on, ladies. Here he comes. The one, the only Mr. Handsome, Matt Lang. Look at you, good fellow. You get better. You're like me. You get better looking as you get older. How do you pull that off?
I'm like a fine wine. I just continue to get older.
But
I just turned, and by the way, I just turned the big 50. So, yeah.
Say that. Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats. My card's in the mail. I'm sure.
Exactly. It's good to be on the show, and it's good to get this thing going. We got Super Bowl Sunday here in a few days, and just it's exciting.
Matt asked me what I'm doing for Super Bowl. I told him.
Yeah.
I eat a bunch of crap and watch football. What else do you do?
We should have been talking about that tonight. Like we should have had like a tournament for like best food, Super Bowl foods. You know what I'm saying?
I'm pretty easy to please, though. You know what I mean? Whatever you're into. If you want to go all fancy schmancy, that's cool. Or you want to do some pizza rolls or whatever you're into.
Cheese and crackers, salami, nacho dip with the sausage in it.
Sounds good. I'm down with that.
Type of thing.
Pretty much what we do. Just snack on a bunch of crap. So
pizza,
all right.
Pizza, and more pizza.
So when this hit, first of all, I heard a little bit of rumbling that there's been talk out of football advisory that this had been mentioned. But Matt, I'm gonna be honest, the timing, it kind of surprised me, and I think it surprised a lot of other people too that just got pushed through, and here we are. Surprised you at all?
Yeah, it did, but I'll just say this, that I think there was rumblings of talk about it. I think there's always been rumblings about it. And I just think it kind of got forgotten because of I think the pandemic and everything that we're going through. And, maybe it's because we had a crazy college football season. Maybe it's because we overcame a lot of stuff with high school football and we finally got that back on the forefront. And then we had those great football games in the NFL, and now we have the Super Bowl, and we're trying to fight through variants and the second and third coming of COVID, and we kind of forgot about it, and it kind of just came out of nowhere, and it kind of hit us like a Mike Tyson left-hand hook, but I think there's a lot of positive feedback about all of this, and there's a lot of other things going on in IHSA too that we'll talk about, but this will be interesting. This 1 through 32 is maybe a long time coming. And I think we'll see where we're going to go out with that. It's going to be really interesting to kind of see how the pockets of towns in the state of Illinois kind of are affected by this.
Yeah.
There's certain pockets of towns that are kind of, let's just be honest, they're kind of live high on the hog. They get a lot of the games. And with the 1 through 32, it may kind of distribute that wealth to other communities. 1A through 4A, obviously, and then 5 through 8A also. So,
and again, there's a couple of real interesting aspects to this. On I guess we'll call it the positive side, we're no longer going to see 6A through 1A end up having to play the same teams theoretically, because it always seemed to work out that way. You had I guess we'll call it your 10 to 12 to maybe even 16 teams that, Matt, you knew were going to be in the playoffs. You knew that they were going to be, whatever class they were going to be in, and they're going to be really good, and they're going to have a chance to, make a deep run. But like in every class, if you're Wilmington, you know you're going to run into Byron. If you're Sacred Heart, you know you're going to run into Rochester. Or if you're Cary Grove, you know you're going to wind up playing Prairie Ridge in probably the second round. Or if you're Lena Winslow, or if you're Forreston, you know you're going to have to knock out your entire conference to win a state title.
Yeah.
I think the positive is you're going to get a true 1 through 32. Now, which is funny with this, it doesn't mean you're going to eliminate those possible matchups. Those very well could, some of those could very well happen under this system. But I think at least, and coaches, I actually talked to Sean Drendel from Naperville North last week, and we talked about this system and, in 8A and how it's worked for them. And Naperville North was in that stranglehold of DuPage Valley teams that literally, Matt, it was like a conference playoff tournament in the IHSA. They would all knock each other out by the quarterfinal round to see who was left. Yeah. Well, last year, Naperville North beat Central, or actually they beat Nequa in week 9, turn around and play Naperville Central in the first round. And they knew it was coming, but he said, at least under this system, it makes sense. There's reasoning to why that matchup happened. So I think that is from the positive standpoint. From the negative standpoint, from what I'm seeing, and it's not a big surprise, there are going to be some travel issues. There is no doubt in my mind that you're going to have a team from downstate either have to go 300 plus miles, or will have an opponent come to them from 300 plus miles. Now, Matt, I don't know the last time you filled up the Leng Mobile. Yeah. Gas prices have not gotten any cheaper here lately. So I don't know. And originally what I was told was part of the reason why Geographics was put into place was to limit travel. Because if you remember at the time, we are around the $4 a gallon gas price. Yeah. So I don't know if, hopefully the gas prices come back down. We things get back. COVID finally starts to subside. We get back to some normalcy. We've been saying that, for 2 years now. But travel, Matt, I think has got to be a concern. I know you're going to hear from some of your friends that are not going to be thrilled about, a Nashville having to go, 350 miles to play. I don't know, somebody in the Rockford area. You're going to hear it. What are you hearing from the coaches you talk to, pro and maybe not so pro?
Well, as I'm getting a little bit older, a lot of the coaches I'm talking to are administrators. And so I get
both sides.
What's that?
You get both sides.
I'm sure. Well, I get thrown in the principal's office and kind of hear the grown-up version of kind of what they think. And one guy that I really respect a lot, he kind of told me this. She's like, the IHSA is always they've always kind of had the pride of keeping everything kind of a regional based theme in their state series. Like when it comes to the end of the year stuff,
basketball,
every other sport,
baseball,
every other sport.
Right.
So now here it is. Finally, it's going to be a statewide series. It ain't going to be regional based anymore. They tried to kind of flirt around that with 16, 1 through 16, 1 through 16. And then
good point.
1 year, 1 through 8, and then 1 through 4, 1 through 4, or 1 through 8, 1 through 8, whatever. You get what I'm getting at,
Right.
That quadrant system back in the day when it first came out, it was just like, I remember when they had the old mid-state conference, with Chenoa and Lexington and El Paso, and it's like they kept beating each other up. And like you just stated, these guys are playing one another all the time. And so now it's truly going to be a state tournament. And so, Chester might be going to Bismarck-Henning. Right. I don't know. Bismarck might be going to Lena Winslow if they were to collide in 1A or 2A. So whatever, you have all these scenarios. And, that whole thing with gas back in the day when we're talking what you're talking about, it's still kind of an issue, but I talked to several administrators, since you told me you kind of wanted to talk about this. I want to get their opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
with everything that's going on, are you worried about that? And, a lot of the guys are not too worried about that. They're not too worried about that because the positives of the whole experience of just new opponents, new trips. It's just such a positive for everybody that's involved. Because if you think about it, and I know there's people out there that, can kind of get on Debbie Downer and say, well, football. Yeah, I understand. This sport right back here is on all the time. And it's the straw that stirs our drink. In high school sports, it is the one sport where you're impacting the most people: cheerleaders, band, booster club, pork chop sellers, pork chop makers, concession stand. And so everybody's going to get a piece of the pie and a taste of it. And, it's just going to be interesting. Back in the 1980s, I was talking to a superintendent today, back in the 1980s, playoff pairings weren't even really ranked back in the 1980s,
Right.
So,
they threw you together.
They just threw you together. And I know this one guy, he kind of had the unfortunate experience of playing on two top 5 ranked state teams, but they played 3 ranked teams like in the first round or two, or the first round or two over the first those last 2 years of his junior and senior year. So looking back, that wasn't really fair at all. And now it's going to be changed. So
I think the one thing you brought up, it's more than one thing, but the one thing that you brought up that I think it's a really interesting angle to come from is the point that every other sport is regionalized.
Yep.
And if I'm in baseball, if I'm in softball now, I just think of the area that I live in. So I'm outside the Joliet area, and not to brag or humble brag, but this area besides football is killer in baseball and softball. I mean, every year we have teams challenging for a state title, and you talk to the coaches up here, and if I'm them, I'm looking at football and saying, hey, why can't we do this in baseball? Why can't we do this in softball? Why can't we do this in these other sports? It makes you think, makes you wonder if this is if these are some slight floodgates that IHSA has opened, that maybe they're going to look back and say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. I would also say that you may be traveling from Bismarck to Chester in round 1, but then the next week it's going to be Bismarck against Maroa. So you have to go back to the normal. So I think sometimes we get kind of worried about we don't have the crystal ball and we don't know what's going to happen, and we're worried about this unexpected. I think it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be engaging for fans, and it's just going to be really interesting to see. But you're truly going to get a state champion. I mean, it's 132, and it's going to be really neat to see how that unfolds.
As far as coming at it from, I guess, as far as the small school level. Do you have experience in making those long bus trips?
Well, when I was at Fisher, we had some long bus trips, and here in my 2 years that I've been lucky to be the coach here at Havana, we've had some long bus trips, and we had those during, we didn't make the playoffs or anything like that, but we had some long bus trips. So if we were to get in the playoffs or would have gotten the playoffs, we would have been traveling. But I just think the whole thing with gas, I think it's still a worrisome type of deal, but I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't think it's a deal breaker. Otherwise, I don't think this thing would have gotten put through. But the point I'm trying to get to is a lot of coaches have told me for a long time, and I tend to agree with it. The kids are missing out on an aspect of the educational process by not making those kind of trips. Meaning the kids from Havana who have probably never left that area in their life, having to go up and play Hope Academy in the city of Chicago for round 1.
Yeah.
That is an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I talked to Tony Sheehan from Oaklawn Richards earlier, and we talked about, I think 3 times out of the last 5 years, they've had to go to East St. Louis for a playoff game. So he's like, hey, I'm all for this system if it avoids me having to go down to East St. Louis. But we talked about his experience, his team's experience of making that trip. And everyone hears about the crime rate and all the problems in East St. Louis. And obviously that hasn't changed. It still goes on. But what he also pointed out was the fact that you go down there, you see their facility, you see the fan support that they have, And he flat out said it was one of the better trips. And I mean, obviously the results didn't turn out well, which I told Tony there's a very long line starting down here of teams that can say the same thing. But just the experience, how their fans interacted and treated the Richards fans and how hospitable everything was. And he said it was an eye-opening experience and one that changed. He said, and to paraphrase him, it changed a lot of thoughts and gave kids a different impression of what they were getting. I mean, to me, that's important, Matt. I think we've missed that.
Oh, I think with the day and age that we're living in now, with sensitivity to some of those topics that we don't want to talk about in terms of multicultural diversity, I think it's really educational. I think it's very important. I'll do some name dropping too. I remember talking to Todd Kuska about him taking his team down there to play down in Belleville or something, and they went out in the middle of freaking cornfield and had mass.
Yeah,
no problems. I talked to Todd Hollis. I talked to BJ Selesnik of taking their 1A, 2A, 3A teams up to play, Chicago Hope or Chicago whoever that Todd played, and everything was fine. It's going to be different. I mean, it's going to be flat out different for a Caucasian kid to go up there and see some diversity, but they need to see that because that's our world and that's the world we live in. On the flip side of it, and I'm not trying to make too much humor of this, but I think it is humorous. I know talking to the kids here at Havana, they kind of pride themselves on wearing their camouflage and being kind of country bumpkins.
Yep.
They didn't know what country bumpkin was until they played a first round game against Central A&M, and there's trucks all the way around the field, and they're honking their horns, and they're going crazy.
I love watching game tape from those schools. It's the best.
That's hillbilly redneck hog football.
Proud of it.
And they take pride in that.
Yep.
They take pride in that, And so, I think anytime you can get a kid to kind of, learn, get exposed to some different things, maybe some uncomfortable things, that's all right. Because kids are resilient and they kind of understand.
I think now more than ever, honestly.
Now more than ever.
If you look at the world we're in now and the way things have gone and how we're more divided now than we've ever been.
Yep.
I think that all this can do is help. I really do. I think it'll be a teaching point, a lesson for those kids. And I think that got lost in the mix as well.
And let's face it, some of those kids that when they get in that charter bus and they're going down Route 39 or 57 or 74, and they're looking at the two top tourist attractions in the state of Illinois, corn and beans. They've never seen really corn and beans.
Well, same with the kids up here. I talked to Tony Sheehan about, you've got kids that, and obviously taking out the East St. Louis trip, but there are tons of schools up here where kids have never left their area. I mean, they have never seen corn. They have never been in the middle of a cornfield or in the middle of the country, if you will. There's a lot to learn there as well. And, again, I think what it comes down to is, you're both coming from completely different backgrounds. But you know what? It's the same game.
Everybody ties their shoes the same and puts their socks on the same. And, I remember when I was in 1997, I was at Colfax Ridgeview and I was coaching for a coach by the name of Coley Welder. And we were making a quarterfinal appearance to take Ridgeview at the time was just Ridgeview. And we were going to Kewanee Wethersfield. A lot of our kids had never seen or been around an African-American student athlete. And Coach Welter had to, kind of put the parameters that, this is football and we're going to be respectful because we're just going to do that. Because I know some of you guys are going to be a little loose-lipped and be kind of goofy. We're not going to do that. And I want to make sure we're clear on that. So again, I think kids are resilient and I think they understand the importance of that. And it's a good learning experience for them.
When this came down, how happy was the NUIC? Pretty happy, I would think.
Well, it's something. Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're getting, it's a Donnybrook. It's a beat up fest. It's an MMA fight, and for them to get out of that, I don't know. Yes. I mean, this is what it's all about. And their conference is taking a beating as it is. with some of those teams having to be, change into 8-man or what have you. And then it's just like, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's not fun, but it's just kind of like, well, here we go again. And I think it's going to bring out, if you can imagine, maybe even more better planning and preparing from a guy from Rick Aarons. That he's going to have to take on
it's a new challenge.
If he would slip to 2A or whatever, or Gibson City would have to take them on or something like that.
Yep.
That's going to be exciting for them, because you can tell them like, hey, listen, we're going 3 hours south and there's really good football down there. And we don't have no room.
And you've never really seen them or ever really played there.
I've never really played them, but here's putting proof in the pudding that they're pretty good. So put your chin strap on and let's have a great week of practice. And by the way, we're leaving pretty early on Saturday.
Yeah. Or we're playing at Wilmington. Go on YouTube and look at the video of Wilmington's warm-up just so you get an idea of what we're walking into.
Yeah.
and how awesome is that for those kids to experience something like that? It's amazing.
Yeah. Or hey, by the way, we're going to Byron and they pull a hog trailer out there. Yeah. Just let you know. Yeah. Just let you know. Yeah. And it's funny, like BJ Selesnik, he always said it the best. He's like, we're going up there and we're going to look like aliens stepping out of a spaceship.
Yep.
And so we're going to look like aliens to the other team, but at the same time, it's vice versa. It's the same thing for us,
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned 8-man because we definitely need to talk about 8-man because I'll be honest, Matt, that might have been the first board meeting notes I saw 8-man even mentioned at all. So I think if you're an 8-man football and in the organization of 8-man football, you've got to be thrilled because, Matt, my takeaway was IHSA is in the process of making that a quote-unquote sanctioned part of football. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Well, I mean, if you look at the numbers, just from the numbers, 325 has been the enrollment cutoff. There was 30 teams this year. There's 35 teams committed for next year for 22, 23. I think 23, 24, it's going to be possibly completely taken over by the IHSA. And I don't know, I could go over the reasons why 8-man is good. Shrinking participation in sport is going to allow our enrollment schools to safely field a team.
Yep.
Co-ops, they can consider splitting and maintaining their school and community identity, which is very important. Scheduling, the 8-man committee, make sure there's no team without an opponent. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of happens if the IHSA takes over. There's just all sorts of good things about it. It's just different and it's new. And I think what's going to be interesting to kind of see down the road, and I've talked to some guys that coach a regular 11-man football, and I've talked to guys, some of my guys that coach 11-man football now coach 8-man football, and I asked them, I go, here's my question. Do you see 8-man bumping up on that Friday morning and it being 8-man 1A, 2A, 3A, and then it being 4A, 5A, 6A, 7A? And I'll be honest with you, I think it's half and half. Some think that's going to happen. Yeah. Others think that it's going to continue to be 4A, 4 classes, and then 4 classes on Saturday, and they're going to keep that game somewhere such as a Monmouth College.
Yeah.
I'd like to elaborate about that. Todd Hollis went over there and took his kids from Elmwood, Brimfield, his 2 boys.
Yep.
And he said it was an incredible atmosphere. I've talked to some other coaches, and I'll keep their names private, other 8-man coaches. And, they flat out say that, when you go to Monmouth College, because of that venue, because of that intimacy and closeness that you have, and it's all by yourself on a Friday night in Monmouth, Illinois, the Maple City, it is very, very, very exciting.
I bet.
Because what it is it brings back the Illinois State mentality of we're going to have everybody on top of you, and it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
And for that 8-man, that's kind of their thing. And so that'll be really interesting to see how this goes. And I think the numbers are going to continue to increase. I think there's going to be more teams. And then the next thing they're going to have to figure out is how much are we going to dip into the bigger enrollment schools.
Right. I think what's interesting about that, and I think what's a really good comparison is that there are a lot of fans of the larger classes up here that are still upset those games don't go to Illinois State.
Yeah.
For the exact reasons you mentioned. It's a smaller compared to Illinois and compared to Northern. It was a smaller facility, but big enough to fit everybody.
Yeah.
But it looked crowded. It felt crowded. It sounded and looked great for TV. And it was that let's pack everybody in and let's get that atmosphere back. Number one, that's why I think Illinois State is going to make a hard push to get the games back, because I think they to this day, I think, regret getting rid of the IHSA state games. That's just my opinion, but I don't think you'd get too many to disagree with me. And the fact that, yeah, you want to create a great atmosphere. And the other thing we need to get figured out from a hosting standpoint, that contract's up, Matt, after next season. So we're gonna get bids and we're gonna get new hosts one way or the other. And I think that 8-man has to figure into those plans for now. They have to be throwing that around behind the scenes. I think you almost have to. If you come out and talk about 8-man like you're progressing to bring them in, I think those talks, at least on a preliminary level, Matt, they've had to happen by now.
Yeah,
talk about it.
And I'm just going to say, when you make it into a state championship game or you make it into a big time game, that's so important to your community and your school. Yeah. And I'm not saying that if you go to a state championship game at the University of Illinois, that it's a bad thing, but it's just the energy kind of tends to get lost, right, and it doesn't look as good. And I know, but here's the thing. I don't think, the IHSA, they want a good matchup and they want the right champion. It's not necessarily entertainment to them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think for us, we like to see all that stuff. But here's the deal, folks. We don't live in Indiana. We don't have a dome stadium. And we don't live in Iowa. We don't have a dome stadium.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah. So, if we could get EDGYTIM to win the lotto.
The Edgy Dome.
We could make the Edgy Dome. But all kidding aside, those are things that they have to think about, because I think we're going to have more and more and more. I think it's going to be so big that we're going to have small school 8-man football and big school 8-man football. We're going to have to, because here's the deal. And you can cut me off there, Mr. Tim, if you want me to, but does a certain school in the Chicago public system need to be playing Geneseo and all these teams and maybe not doing so well? You know what I'm saying? Or not faring so well when they maybe might be a little bit more successful in 8-man football. I'm just saying, in terms of the competition, competition committee and all those things, you have to think about those things.
You do. It's a really good point.
What's best and right for kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe it does grow from there. Maybe 8-man does grow. Maybe you pull from, because let's face it, I mean, we can talk about Chicago Public League.
Yeah.
There are programs in that league every year that have all the best intents and purposes, and come mid-late August, that coach is still driving around trying to find kids to turn out for football, and we're seeing it more and more. There are more programs that end up canceling. If you go 8-man, if those programs are allowed to go 8-man, maybe that eases that a bit, yet you're still keeping kids involved in football. So I hear you. It's something to really talk about for sure.
Listen, I didn't mean to make a knock on that in terms of
no, being honest. I would have said the same thing.
Here's the deal. I'll mention the schools. I mean, there's concerns at the Urbanas and the Rand schools and the Champaign Centennials and the Centrals. There's a concern at Fisher.
Yeah.
There's concern at this school. I'm no longer the head coach here. The numbers are good. They got a new brass here. It's good. It's going to be good because the numbers are good right now. But what's it going to be like down the road?
Right.
I just talked to Colton Hammond here today. I was like, hey, I'm doing a podcast tonight. What's your thoughts on 8-man and 1 through 32? And those are concerns he's going to have to think about. When I came down here to take the job, I recruited 18 freshmen. Next year, we got 14 freshmen. Football's good here. It's healthy, but it's a slippery slope, man. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And you're always worried about what's best for kids.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll wrap this up. I think it was the right move. I really do. I think it's a move in the right direction. I think it's a move by the IHSA to try to improve a pretty good playoff system that we already have in place. We'll see how things shake out.
Here's the thing, you got to, I think when you're dealing with human beings, coaches, administrators, and most importantly, the number one thing, kids.
Yep.
We've always been resilient. We've always found a way. This is just a new splash that we're going to be dealing with. 1 through 32 will be fine. It'll be different. It'll be unique. There'll be people that are going to, excuse my language, bitch and moan about some of the things with the gas and this and that, whatever, and the matchups. It's a true statewide system now.
Yeah.
8-man, that's still yet to be determined. I mean, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens, because I think there's going to be more and more teams that do that. And it's because of all the things that are going on in our world. And maybe it's because of our pandemic. Maybe it's because
that's okay. And that's okay, because we're adjusting and we're adapting and we're trying to keep those kids involved. So.
Exactly. And, when I came here, I asked my superintendent that, and I think I said this, and you guys haven't had to look at my ugly face when I've said this, but I'm saying it now. It's one of the things I asked my superintendent. What are your thoughts on 8-man? And he's a very well-respected superintendent, Mr. Matt Plater here. He told me, he's like, every school deserves football on a Friday night.
Yeah.
If that has to be 8-man, you cross that bridge when you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's not a life sentence either, as you all know. So
No.
All right. Well, we talked some 1 through 32. We talked 8-man football. I feel good.
I feel good too.
Nice to see you.
Hey, Brad Allen, Hinsdale Central, plays for the Los Angeles Rams.
Brian Allen.
Brian Allen, yep.
David Edwards.
Yep.
Downers Grove North, was a quarterback. Now he's an offensive tackle.
Yeah. He went to old Wisconsin and got big.
Yep. So I will be watching the big game. I know you will be as well. And we'll do this again. But now, ladies, here you go. The best looking guy on the entire video cast is.
Can I get a matching hat?
Right here.
Can I get a matching hat?
No, this is a socks hat. You're not putting a socks hat on. I'm not letting you.
I don't need to. I mean, look at this.
I need to.
Sorry I made you do it.
Kids doing well? Everybody good?
Everything's fine. Everything's going good. So getting ready to purchase a 2010 Chevy for my daughter that has 150,000 miles on it and cost me $3,500.
There you go. Welcome to the used car market, the insane used car market.
I got lucky though.
Crazy.
Life is good. And things are good. And I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl. And I'm really looking forward to the halftime show.
All right. We'll let you go. Good to see you.